Welcome to the second episode of Newsreel Now. Newsreel Now is a online show that is an online Sunday show that grew up on the internet. I'm the host Jack Brewster here with my co-host Nadia Ye. We're here to break down some of the biggest stories of the last week and bring in guests to conduct analysis on those stories. Our first story this afternoon. America turns 250 next month, and the federal celebration concert is already losing acts in real time. The event is called the Great American State Fair. It's run by an organization called Freedom 250, created by President Trump by executive order in January. It's set for the National Mall, June 25th through July 10th. The original lineup had 9 acts. In the last week, 6 of them have walked. Martina McBride, the Commodores, Bret Michaels, Young MC, Morris Day, and The Time, and the original Milli Vanilli singers. Their reasons are nearly identical. They say they were told the event was nonpartisan, and then it wasn't. Young MC called it, quote, a bait and switch. Country singer Martina McBride posted this on Instagram. I asked lots of questions and was assured this was a nonpartisan event that was meant to celebrate all 50 states. Yesterday, things started changing, and what we were told is, in fact, not what is happening. President Trump responded Saturday on Truth Social. He floated headlining the concert himself, calling himself, quote, the man who some say is the greatest president in history. Later that night, he wrote, quote, we should have a giant Make America Great Again rally for 250 instead of having overpriced singers who nobody wants to hear, whose music is boring, and yet who do nothing but complain. Cancel it. Freedom 250 has confirmed that the president will kick off the celebration on Wednesday, June 24th. One detail that's too good not to mention, the talent booker for Freedom 250 is a guy named Jeffrey Epstein. Nadia, I'm curious what your thoughts are on the controversy here as an outsider watching this from the UK.
Hi, Jack. First of all, thank you. I think to be honest, most of the people that I've spoken to haven't heard about the controversy surrounding America 250. I think they're aware that there's a big celebration upcoming, but I don't think it's that relevant to people's day-to-day lives here. So more than anything, a lot of Trump headlines tends to get a lot of, I think it just seems rather absurd and sometimes amusing, but people have the distance from it, I think, to not be so attached to it. So to be honest, I haven't heard that much.
If you had a real budget and you were programming America's 250th birthday, who would you book?
This is a personal preference. I love Lil Wayne. Would love to see him up there.
Okay.
You Lil Wayne fan, Jack?
No, I mean, I think he's underrated. I obviously grew up with his songs. He hasn't had many hits lately, but I have a couple friends who argue frequently that he's the greatest rapper of all time, which is a very, very hot take. I'm not sure how that would go over America 250, but I take your preference. So let's say, just a counterfactual here, let's say Kamala won in 2024. How do you think this celebration might have been different?
I think if she did win, I mean, during her campaign, which I know was very rushed, especially with Biden dropping out at the last minute.
Yeah.
But a lot of celebrities did come out and endorse her. So I would figure that, some of the people who did would be willing to perform at America 250. And I think some of these celebrities were like Beyonce, Billie Eilish, Taylor Swift, Eminem. So it would probably, I think it would have been perhaps a more star-studded event.
Yeah, I think also too there would have been a lot more conversations about history and like how we should be thinking about this moment. I mean, I watched Ken Burns' documentary on the American Revolution, which is showing the nerd side of me. But I think it also just says something about how a lot of history is missing from conversations about history is missing from the American 250 celebration. I haven't really heard much about that documentary. And I feel like there would have been more conversations about how we should be marking this moment. Instead, it's really been about Trump and the acts that are just dropping out and kind of how the celebration is actually unfolding. So I'll be curious to see actually how it goes in the coming weeks. All right, Nadia, on to you to talk about Anthropic and AI from America 250 to artificial intelligence. Over to you.
Okay, so next up we have Anthropic, the company behind the Claude chatbot. And news this week came out that it has confidentially filed for an IPO, and it's been all over the news. So if you haven't heard about it by now, I'm sure this will trigger something in your algorithm. But part of the conversation has really been centered around its rivalry with OpenAI, which, for those of you who don't know, Anthropic was founded by former OpenAI researchers in 2021 and recently reached a valuation of roughly a whopping $965 billion, surpassing OpenAI. And OpenAI is also planning to IPO this year, though it hasn't announced any plans as of yet. So Jemima, we have our guest Jemima. Do you think that there's a first mover's advantage to Anthropic filing first?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, there's been this long-standing rivalry between OpenAI and Anthropic, as you mentioned. Anthropic was started by former OpenAI people. They are constantly trying to get in front of each other on announcements of product launches and such. So this is personal for both companies. They both want to be the first one to go public, and there's a big reason for that, which is, we don't know the appetite among like retail investors and outside of the private markets for these companies. And so whichever one goes public first is going to have the advantage. So it's definitely a race to see who can do it first.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of people were also expecting OpenAI to IPO first, which was, a surprise when Anthropic did. So we've also seen a lot of headlines about how companies are laying off employees in the name of AI to cut costs. And Anthropic, it's focused on selling more to companies than to consumers directly. But Axios actually recently reported that some companies are experiencing like serious AI sticker shock. Basically, the cost of tokens are way more expensive than they thought. And Bain published a survey of nearly 1,000 companies showing that after investing in AI, the value didn't arrive. So I think 40% of surveyed companies reporting that AI cost savings below around 10%. So from your side, do you think the trade-off is overblown? Is it worth it?
I mean, what we're hearing that narrative a lot from the companies that we speak with right now, which is, it's costing so much to run these models. How sustainable is this? Are we getting, the benefit that makes spending this money worth it? I think it's also tied to, the IPOs of Anthropic and OpenAI, which is it's really going to be a test of like public appetite for these companies and for AI. People are really excited about it in Silicon Valley. They're using it, they're blowing through tokens, but it's still in the novelty phase where I think if it continues to be so expensive and people don't feel like they're getting the results, then perhaps like the tide will turn, and that, will obviously impact the way that these companies are viewed in the public markets when they do go public.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And speaking of, the appetite in Silicon Valley, Anthropic isn't the only AI or big tech company that's going public. As I mentioned before, OpenAI is planning one later this year, and SpaceX recently announced sort of the price that it's listing at, or its share price. And I guess depending on how you categorize it, it could count as an AI startup ever since it absorbed xAI. And I think there's a lot of mania surrounding all of these blockbuster IPOs, but none of the companies are profitable yet since they're spending so much money, investing in research and development, infrastructure, et cetera. So investors really seem to be betting on future potential, and some people have compared it to the dot-com bubble. And I just want to know, do you agree with that? Like, is it an AI bubble?
You're 100% right. The valuations do not exactly match with the financials right now. It's a lot based on future potential. A lot of these companies do have really high revenue, but it's not necessarily translating to profits. I know it was recently reported, though, that Anthropic may be about to have its first profitable quarter, which would make it, of the three companies that are planning to go public, the only one that's profitable. XAI is losing a lot of money. So it's really betting on the leaders. It's betting on the technology. Do I think it's a bubble? I have no idea. I think if people had the answer to that, there would be more of a decisive, movement in the markets, or I don't know. It just seems like people are really divided. Everyone wants to believe this is going to work out, and I think specifically with SpaceX, it's really hard to bet against Elon Musk because he just always seems to make it work, even if it's through unconventional methods. But yeah, there's a lot that remains to be seen here.
Yeah, and do you think, like, for someone who isn't in VC or isn't a billionaire, like, what would you say about all the mania? How would you make sense of it as a technology reporter?
I would be very skeptical, to be honest, if you're a retail investor. I know SpaceX has opened up more allocation to retail investors than is typical. And I'm sure there's going to be a big fight over getting, shares in Anthropic and OpenAI. I would be skeptical about where you're putting your money, obviously, if you're a retail investor that isn't in the tech space. At the same time, this looking back over like the tech IPOs of, Google, Amazon, I think people really are equating this moment to that moment. So I would struggle to advise any retail investors on how to act. Just move with caution. Don't put all your life savings into any of these companies, but maybe it's a good idea to give it a go. You never know, maybe this is going to be the next Google or Amazon, or maybe it's all going to collapse around us. It's really hard to tell what direction it's going to go in.
Yeah, no, and to clarify, we're not trying to give it financial advice. This is just purely.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And okay, so on to our next segment, which, speaking of AI and where that's taking society, our next segment is on how remote work is worsening youth unemployment, at least according to the New York Fed. And young college graduates are facing higher unemployment than before the pandemic, according to the Fed. And new research suggests that the rise of remote work is a major reason why. So accounting for about 64% of the increase in unemployment. And so with us today, we have Rahim Jasani. And first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And my first question for you is, based on your line of work, I assume you talk to a lot of young people and creators. Have you seen the pattern of unemployment in the people that you've spoken to?
Yeah, I think there's a term that people often talk about, which is overeducated, but then unemployed. And so I think Gen Z has known the value of an education, what it means, but that the value of that degree has almost went away, especially with the value of remote work. And at the same time, what I'm hearing from people is that rent is too high, student loans are too high. And so a lot of Gen Zers, as many of you know, are living back with their parents now, and they're doing whatever they can to save money. And as a result of that, remote work is preferred, even though I think there was a Gallup poll that also said that only 6% prefer, to go full-time in person, but I think 71 preferred a hybrid model. So from the people who I've talked to, from my Gen Z audience, from myself of being a creator journalist, as well as working with a lot of creators, it is a trend that remote work is valuable, but then it comes with the side effects of you're not truly building better professional development, and jobs could not want you because of that, especially with the graduating class right now, because this is only getting exacerbated as wages aren't increasing, and things are getting more expensive.
Right, and that actually leads me well into my next question. The findings from the report also suggest that remote work can make training and mentoring harder, reducing employers' appetite for entry-level hires. Do you think being remote negatively affects, your impact to be able to make those human connections and build that network?
I think it depends. I think I am someone who has been remote basically his entire life, and so I'm a little bit biased on this question. I did when I did work in person. However, the in-person connections posed a value. I think there was another study, I think by Freeman, that showed that there is, I think, almost 91% valued in-person relationships. I think especially in a post-COVID-19 pandemic world, Gen Z value this. However, the professional development is the question. But the question I ask is, why aren't they learning these kind of things in school? I remember when I first graduated, a lot, the basic things like Excel sheets, Google Drive, like these are things people were asking me about, and a lot of my colleagues didn't know. And I was like, why? I think being taught a lot of these professional development things early on in the institutions that we're learning, I mean, we paid for a 4-year degree, is now more important than ever. And I think more importantly is how are we, and as they get used to this post, again, COVID-19 pandemic world, we're learning these skills early on so that these, when we go into the job market, we're better prepared. But then also, we, as you talked about in the previous session, the rise of AI prevents that, as well as this economic need to stay at home. But then it's like, are you missing an opportunity? But can you even get that opportunity, right? So you could go to a big city. I'm from Florida originally. To big city, New York, Boston, and get that in-person connection, but at the sacrifice of future financial stability. So it's a balance that I think a lot of Gen Zers question every day.
Right. And, you mentioned AI again, and I think that, the findings also suggest that many observers have blamed generative AI for weak hiring of recent graduates. But youth employment, according to the data, youth unemployment began rising before AI tools spread widely across the workplace. Do you find that reflects your real life interactions with people? How are people feeling about AI? Has it been the cause of maybe some layoffs? Yeah.
It depends on, I think every industry depends upon, again, I'm a creator, and so I think the creator economy is the kind of antithesis, the opposite of the AI world, where it is real human interaction. It is, people faces you are seeing on a daily basis. AI, on the other hand, for a lot of the Gen Z audiences, at least my audience I've spoken to, has not taken over their job necessarily, but has reduced a part of their workload, and they're making it a priority. And as a part of that priority over time, I think the fear is that, what if that requires an entire skill to go down? And I think of, as a journalist, I think of copy editors, right? I think of some of those, a lot of the traditional journalists, kids who want to be those journalists, who have those skills of writing and editing, and some of those things are being reduced. So the value isn't necessarily is reduced, but it's also, at the same time, it's also a benefit because you can produce more. So it's kind of this hybrid model. So I can tell you for a fact that, when I was in college, we were using AI, and I think the challenge, especially in college and schools, is using it in an ethical manner. And so they're still going to need, I think colleges and schools and industries are still going to look for people who have mastered the skills of AI. And I think we have the advantage of mastering these skills of AI. I think the question becomes, what is the direction of the industry? If they're going to go super fast paced at it and not regulated and pushed to the point where they don't understand it, that's when the walls will come tumbling down.
No, agreed. And I think that, if jobs are able to adapt their roles to be able to encompass AI, it hopefully will give, young workers some more opportunities to actually be able to put those skills to use. And just to end with my last question, just generally, what do you think has been the overall sentiment with, remote work and unemployment? What are people feeling?
I think a part of it, I know a lot of friends who have lost jobs in recent days, who have, they're all Gen Zers who were all remote. A lot of them were remote work, and because in-person office is coming, is coming back. I feel like a lot of people are prioritizing that, especially the bigger companies, and it becomes a sentiment of I don't think that those individuals lost a value. Again, I think it comes down to all of it comes down to the economics. I keep repeating myself if that is the case, but it comes down to how are they being treated in their financial situation. And that's why I think remote work provides a value, as well as the mental health. I think the mental health is something we don't really talk about, the work-life balance and lifestyle, right? To be able to like do your laundry, but also go into a meeting. I think there's a value in that for Gen Z who does prioritize mental health. So like when I think of remote work, when I think of all these things, it is inherently for the Gen Z audience, Gen Zers and Gen Alpha. For us, it's inherently different. It's how we kind of grew up with. So we have a different definition of that. And 10 to 15 years from now, I still believe it will be a valuable asset, especially for mental health. I don't believe, I think Fridays will hopefully one day everywhere be completely remote. I don't know. That is the dream, I guess, for Gen Zers out there. But it comes down to what is beneficial financially for them and the mental health well-being. I think the combination of that is why it's valuable for people. And there's going to be ways where we can kind of get the social interaction together as well. I think a great hybrid. I think most Gen Zers prefer a hybrid model. I think the hybrid model is the way to go.
Right. And, I think what you said about mental health, it is so much harder to draw boundaries. Yeah, it is so much harder to draw boundaries when it comes to remote work. I've also been remote for a couple years now. So, the toll it can take on mental health without clear structure can be, very taxing. So
I'm gonna step in here, Nadia. We got to go to our next segment. Thank you so much for coming in, Raheem. Now over to Los Angeles, where a reality TV star is one election away from running America's largest city. Spencer Pratt is currently in second in Tuesday's LA mayoral primary, but the results are not final yet. So let's start there. The AP has called Mayor Karen Bass as advancing to November's runoff, but they haven't called the second slot where Pratt and Progressive City Council member Nithya Raman are battling for the second spot. With about 62% of the vote counted, Bass is at 35%, Pratt at 30%, and Raman at 23%. There are still about roughly 322,000 ballots left to count, and the remaining mail-in vote is expected to favor Bass and Raman, which means Pratt's lead could shrink in the coming days. For context, Pratt is a registered Republican, and LA hasn't elected a Republican mayor in about 25 years. For more on this, we're joined now by Taylor Lorenz, who covers internet culture at User Mag. Thank you so much for joining us, Taylor.
Thanks for having me.
So Pratt's entire campaign is built on AI-generated videos, him as Batman, him as Jedi, the mayor as a villain. From a content perspective, what makes this stuff break through when most political ads are not?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know, it sort of depends how you define breakthrough. I think these campaign ads are shocking and craven, and so they go viral, but it doesn't seem like they've really motivated voters in LA necessarily. But I do think that like he's sort of doing the Andrew Cuomo slop, type style where it's just sort of just make as much sort of weird AI garbage content as possible.
Yeah, you also tweeted very recently about the clipping economy, and I think you were actually talking about Pratt and how he had hired a bunch of clippers to start pumping out these videos. Can you just talk to our audience a little bit about what the clipping economy is and what Pratt was doing?
Yeah, so the clipping economy is just kind of what it sounds like. It's just clippers. It's people taking content, clipping it down to short form videos, and then distributing those short form videos across social media. It's pretty standard marketing, social media marketing. And so Spencer Pratt obviously leveraged this as well, where he was paying people to share videos, video clips of himself looking positive. Normally it was a lot of like clips from the debate that he had with Raman and Bass, where he thought that he looked good. And so he's just paying people to share that content to try to sway public opinion.
If he does advance, I mean, do you think that this strategy would continue to work? I know you said that you're skeptical of it, but I mean, Mamdani obviously was very successful in New York, leveraging social.
Mamdani had the opposite social strategy. So Mamdani's strategy was complete opposite, where he was all organic. It was relying on this sort of like grassroots community movement. It was very local.
Do you think though that he's going to get any kind of traction organically, or is it this just kind of the only thing he has is this artificial turfing kind of thing?
Yeah, he doesn't have the organic traction. So Mamdani has this like hyper dedicated like movement that, so he never had to do the paid media stuff because he had that like, grassroots organizing base. But Spencer Pratt, the majority of Spencer Pratt donors are not based in LA. He does not have an organic grassroots movement in LA. So he has to do all this paid media stuff to try to even compete, because he doesn't have those people just doing it for him. He doesn't have like a mass army of the DSA, you know, like going out and posting on his behalf. So I'm pretty skeptical that he'll move forward. I mean, most of the ballot, he's in the running just along with anyone else, but he's not, like, we really don't know how the race will go for several days. Either way, I think clipping has been a core part of a lot of politicians' strategy. For a while, we've seen tons of MAGA people do this. Trump has done this. This is like pretty standard marketing for any sort of product or music artist or whatever. And so I think you're seeing more and more politicians engage in all forms of digital marketing. We also had Tom Steyer doing UGC campaigns.
I was going to say Steyer, yeah. But just last question, what do you think that says about the sort of state of politics today?
I think it's a bad thing because we have no transparency over these sort of more modern digital marketing techniques. And we had a lot of transparency laws around traditional marketing, you know, advertising on TV, print advertisers, mailers. Those are all very heavily regulated. Now we have a effectively non-existent FEC that is doing no oversight over this entire internet economy. And you have a lot of people, you know, being marketed to with these messages that they don't realize, you know, is paid messaging.
Thank you so much, Taylor.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Okay, now we're going to move on to our last segment of the day, which is a recurring segment called the Rage Bait of the Week, where we analyze a particular trending social media post that's gone viral that capitalizes on the algorithm's propensity to post and boost negative content. On Tuesday, the second day of Pride Month, a sitting member of Congress posted on his official account, quote, "Homosexuality has no place in America. Happy Nuclear Family Month." The congressman is Andy Ogles, a Republican from Tennessee. And the Nuclear Family Month line is actually a real reference. So Tennessee Governor Bill Lee signed a state resolution this year designated June as Nuclear Family Month, defined as, quote, one husband, one wife, and their children. By Tuesday night, Ogles had deleted the post with an explanation in his own words saying, quote, "Earlier today, while working on the farm, my phone began going crazy because of a post made by a member of my comms team. The post was stupid, hurtful, and a complete distraction from my America First focus. The employee has been reprimanded." What makes this a story isn't really the post, though. It's that the members of his own party publicly rebuked him. So the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, a Republican from Louisiana, called the post, quote, untoward, and said the Bible is unequivocal. He added, "We're supposed to love our neighbor as ourselves, everybody." House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, also a Louisiana Republican, called the post inappropriate and reprehensible. And New York Republican Mike Lawler called the post, quote, "absolutely idiotic." On Wednesday, he added, "I'm glad he deleted the post, but do better. You go to another part of the world and people are killed for being gay. So to me, that kind of crap has no place in politics." Today, I'm welcomed by Lucas Venturis, a Democratic candidate from New York's 1st Congressional District. Nice to have you on, Lucas.
Thank you for having me.
So as a young Democrat running in a Long Island swing district, what was your reaction to this post?
Well, I think sadly my initial reaction wasn't necessarily shocked, because this is kind of par for the course for the Freedom Caucus rhetoric. But as a young person, but particularly as a person running in it, as you say, a swing district, especially a district that has gone red for over a decade now, my initial thought was, that stuff has no place here, and it doesn't really matter if you're a Republican in a Republican-leaning district. When you're a member of Congress, it's an honor to be a public servant, and you're supposed to serve everyone. So, that kind of, diminishing talk to aspects of different constituencies, I just think it's wrong, and it sets a bad example.
It's nice to have the chorus of New York behind you. So do you tweet yourself? Like, what do you think the best way is for politicians to communicate with their voters in 2026? Because I mean, this is definitely interesting. The story, right? He says that it was. I mean, he says, we don't know. We'll never know for sure, but it was a member of his staff. So, what do you think the best way is for politicians to communicate with their voters?
Listen, I do tweet. I think,
No.
I think once you get to a certain level in campaigns, especially once you win and you're a member of Congress or an elected official, there's a certain or majority of the stuff you're not probably posting yourself. You might be okaying it. But I personally, I try and be active on my social media and respond to people. I don't think that you should ever. I mean, that I think speaks for itself. To go out of your way, whether it was him or a member of his staff, the staff speaks for you, and the buck stops with you as a member of Congress or as a candidate. So, you know, that can that that member of your staff is speaking for you, and that speaks volumes when you're supposed to be representing so many people. So I believe in a bit more of transparency on the internet, a bit more of authenticity, like actually engaging with people, especially your constituents. But I think when you use that as license to just be horrible and rude and nasty and divisive on purpose, I think that crosses a line where you say, okay, maybe I understand why certain politicians have a more reserved tone on the internet.
So you're 25 years old, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm 30. That makes me feel like I'm an uncle or something. But the average age of a member of Congress is, I think, about 69 or 70 now. Why do you think the age has been trending up, and what do you, as what would be the youngest member of Congress, have to say about that?
I think the age trending up is really a control of power problem. And so when you have a majority of the wealth in this country held by a certain age demographic, those people have a vested interest in financing politics that look like the issues that they find important, whether that's investments or the cost of their houses and things of that nature. They have a vested interest in keeping the politics looking in a way that makes more sense to them. But I also think because so much wealth is held in certain generations, and running for office is so expensive, and it's such an arduous endeavor. I've not taken money from any billionaires or anything like that. I've completely grassroots campaign, $25 on average per donation to my campaign. But that is only possible because I set out 2 years ahead of an election to try and actually wage a real fight. If you're a regular young person or even just a working class person of any age, it's so hard to run for office that only people with money or only people with connections or access to others with money are really able to engage in the political process. And I think that's a big problem. And I hope that I'd be the first member of Congress born in the 21st century, which I think is a much needed stark shift in our current climate.
Tell us about your race. I mean, this is technically a national audience, but tell us about your race. And I think the primary is coming up on June 23rd, and what your pitch is to voters.
Well, listen, I think that my district is very indicative of, I always say it's a microcosm of America, because you have registration that's pretty similar between Democrats, Republicans, independents. You have pockets of different, almost like seems like cultures on the island within Suffolk County. And it's such a diverse place of thought, ethnicity, religion, everything. And, what I have posited is that the Democrats' failure to articulate a different message, to articulate a message of substance, of true policy, and to have the humility to understand that we've been wrong, our strategy has failed. We need to actually hit certain parts of the district that, like the greater United States, that feel like flyover country at this point. And Suffolk is so, vast a district or a county, and it encompasses most of the county in the district. And, my pitch to people has been that, I care about working class issues. I've centered my campaign on the working class. As I said, I don't take super PAC money, billionaire money, corporate money. I'm a completely grassroots funded campaign. I want to fight for healthcare. I want to fight for, childcare. I want to fight to, stop the war machine that sees us spend billions of dollars seemingly a day when we can't spend that money domestically. I pitch this to Democrats, Republicans, and independents that, regardless of party ID, this is a moment to sort of shed ourselves of this, corrupt corporate establishment in both parties. And I know that's a message that has been cynically co-opted by so many people, but I feel like I'm a living testament to, you can start a campaign based on ideals, and if you have the passion and you articulate that passion in a way that's salient with people, you can build a campaign that has a real chance to knock out an incumbent and be the Democratic nominee. And I think that more campaigns, and I'm not just saying that because I'm doing this, but I think more campaigns need to, shed themselves of the corporatism and just center themselves on their communities and the working class. And
thanks for coming on, Lucas. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Of course. Nadia, that wraps up episode 2. What do you think of the guests we had?
Fantastic, as always. It was great. I think we really covered a wide range of topics, and it's always interesting to hear rage bait of the week. So
yes, exactly. Thank you so much for all our listeners, and we'll see you next week.